The funeral procession moved slowly down the red clay road, swallowed by the heavy stillness of a southern summer. Heat shimmered off the dirt, and the air clung to skin like wet linen. A white coffin, small as a cradle, rocked atop a creaking wooden cart pulled by two mules. Behind it walked a group of people dressed in faded Sunday clothes, heads bowed, lips tight. Martha Bell walked alone, 5 steps behind the cart. Her hands were folded in front of her apron, her gaze fixed on the ground, her expression unreadable. Not grief, not peace, just silence. Her face bore no trace of tears, only time and wear. It was the 3rd child buried that year. The other enslaved people kept glancing at her, careful not to be seen doing so. They didn't speak her name, but the questions hovered like gnats. Why always her? Why always the children under her care? The bell from the plantation chapel rang once, flat and low, like a final breath. Miss Eliza Granger, the mistress of the house, stood beside the open grave, her skin pale beneath her black lace veil. Her husband had died 2 years earlier. Now her children were slipping through her fingers one by one. As the coffin was lowered into the ground, Eliza's lips moved in prayer, barely audible, trembling. Martha remained still. Her dark eyes did not rise. Behind the crowd, Auntie Ruth leaned on her cane and whispered to the young girl beside her, "God keeps records, child. Some debts ain't paid in coin." A thick hush settled over the gathering, broken only by the chirr of cicadas and the soft thud of earth falling over the coffin. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe for more true stories from America's forgotten past, stories that deserve to be heard. Back at the plantation, life resumed as it always did. The enslaved returned to their quarters. Miss Eliza shut herself in her parlor, eyes glazed over, holding the embroidered bonnet of her dead daughter like it might still be warm. Only Martha remained outside, standing beneath the willow tree that swayed over the graveyard. The hem of her skirt fluttered in the breeze, but she didn't move. She could still hear the child's voice, Mary's tiny wheeze, the rattle of her breath in the dark bedroom, the way her hand gripped Martha's fingers, then slipped away. She had watched it all. She had done everything. Or had she? Later that evening, while the sky burned orange and the river behind the fields reflected fire, a shadow passed the window of the Granger house. Miss Eliza sat alone in the drawing room, staring into her untouched tea. She didn't cry, she murmured to no one. She never cries. No one answered. The candle flickered. Inside her cramped cabin, Martha lit her own candle and sat at the edge of her bed. On the small wooden shelf above it sat a tiny worn shoe, Samuel's, her son, gone nearly a decade, sold south to pay off debts. She never found out where. The shoe was the only thing they hadn't taken. She closed her eyes. The weight of the day pressed hard on her chest. 3 children dead, and the 2 who remained, James and Clara, sickly, brittle, barely speaking. Each day she dressed them, fed them, held their frail bodies through fever and fit. Each day they got thinner. The silence in the cabin grew thick, like the Georgia humidity, unbroken even by the chorus of crickets. She stared at the flame. It didn't flicker. In the dark she whispered, "I don't forget." Outside the breeze picked up, rustling the trees and sweeping fine dust across the graves. The earth shifted ever so slightly. The slow reckoning had already begun. The Granger house loomed at the edge of the fields, its white columns streaked with grime, shutters hanging slightly crooked, as if the house itself was watching and weary. Its wide veranda once welcomed guests from Savannah, but now it creaked in the wind like old bones. Time and grief had settled into the wood. Inside, the air was stale with lavender and dust. The parlor was filled with things once meant to impress: velvet curtains, imported rugs, silver candlesticks. But none of it shined. The children no longer played on the floor, and the piano in the corner sat unopened, its keys silent. Martha stepped through the back entrance, past the pantry and into the hallway. The old floor groaned beneath her weight, though she moved carefully as she always had. Her eyes scanned the house with the trained stillness of someone who had survived by not being seen. Yet she knew every creak, every room, every secret in the walls. From upstairs a soft cough echoed, a boy's. James. Martha's feet moved without hesitation. Miss Eliza stood at the landing, her hand resting on the rail. She was in her 30s, yet already looked twice her age. Grief and bitterness had carved deep hollows beneath her eyes. She wore the same black dress from the funeral, still buttoned to the throat. "They've barely touched their food," Eliza said without looking at Martha. "Clara refuses to eat." "James won't get out of bed." Martha nodded once. "I want them brought to the sitting room this afternoon," Eliza continued. "They need air and sunlight. The doctor said—" She stopped. Her voice trembled, but she bit down on it quickly. "Yes, ma'am," Martha said quietly. Eliza's gaze finally shifted toward her. There was something in it, an expectation, or suspicion, or both. "I've been here a long time, Martha. 20 years, ma'am. Longer than I've had children, longer than I've had this house." Martha waited. She knew this was not conversation. It was a test, and she had passed many like it before. "I relied on you," Eliza whispered, as if talking to herself. "I trusted you." Martha did not answer. The words hung heavy between them. Back in the nursery, the scent of sickness clung to the air like mildew. Martha washed James's face with a damp cloth, her hands steady. His eyes fluttered open briefly. "Miss Bell," he croaked. "I'm here. I saw Mary last night. She was at the window." Martha paused but didn't speak. She said to come with her." "You're not going anywhere," Martha replied gently, pressing the cloth to his forehead. He closed his eyes again, lips trembling. She smoothed his hair and tucked the blanket beneath his chin. The room was too quiet. A breeze slipped through the cracked window, lifting the edge of the curtain. It carried the scent of pine and smoke, and something else, faint, like decay. Martha looked out. The graves were just beyond the tree line, barely visible in the tall grass. Downstairs, she led Clara into the sunlit parlour. The child's dress hung loose on her small frame, and she walked with the listless movements of a fever dream. Eliza sat stiffly in her chair, hands clasped in her lap, watching both of them like a judge at trial. "You've always known what's best for them," Eliza said. "You're closer to them than I ever could be." Martha didn't reply. "You were with Mary when she passed, and with Thomas and little Grace." Clara turned her face into Martha's sleeve. The silence that followed cracked something in the room. Eliza whispered, almost choking, "Were they in pain?" "No, ma'am." And it was true. Martha had made sure of that. Whatever else might be said, the children did not suffer. Outside, the clouds gathered again. A hush fell over the house, as if it too was listening. Something inside it was beginning to shift, and it would not be silenced for long. Martha rose before the rooster called. The sun had not yet broken the horizon, and the fields outside were dark with dew. In the quiet, she moved like a shadow, her steps rehearsed, her breath even. She lit the fire in the kitchen, set water to boil, prepared broth for Clara, grits for James. The house was still, but her mind was not. Each movement held weight, each spoon stirred, each cloth folded. Her hands remembered the softness of Mary's curls, the weak flutter of Thomas's breath, the silence after Grace's final gasp. Her chest tightened, but her face remained blank. No one asked if she was mourning. No one dared. The others in the quarters avoided her now. Not openly, but enough. They didn't sit beside her at night, they didn't ask questions, and Martha didn't offer answers. Auntie Ruth, her old hands rough with years, watched her from a distance. Sometimes she hummed when Martha passed, tunes too old to trace. Other times she simply stared, like she knew. "You fight in a quiet war," she once said. "A war nobody sees but God." Martha hadn't answered then. She didn't now. Upstairs, Clara whimpered in her sleep. The fever was light, not yet dangerous, but still. The children lived in a world wrapped in lace and scripture, and yet death moved through it like a breeze through cotton. Nothing stopped it. Not prayers, not doctors, not love. When she entered the nursery, James was awake, sitting up weakly against the headboard. His cheeks were hollow, but his eyes tracked her every step. "You'll stay, won't you?" he asked. "I'm right here," she said. "You stayed with Mary?" Martha nodded. "Yes. She said she wasn't scared when she went." "She wasn't. Because of you." Martha sat beside him. "Because she knew she was loved." The boy's lip quivered and he looked away. "Mama doesn't come up here much anymore. She's grieving. She was grieving before Mary died." Martha said nothing. Some truths didn't need telling. Later, Eliza entered the nursery. Her eyes rimmed red, her posture tight. She didn't look at Martha as she adjusted the curtains, checked the folded linens, pretended to tidy what was already clean. "James, how are you feeling?" "Better," he whispered, but there was no joy in it. She gave him a faint smile, then turned to Martha. "You've been giving them the tonics." "Yes, ma'am. And the laudanum only when needed." "Only when needed," Eliza hesitated. Do you think they'll be all right?" Martha looked at the boy, pale and thin beneath the quilt, then at Clara, still sleeping in the next bed. "I do what I can," she said. Eliza's eyes filled for a moment, then cleared. "Of course." "Of course you do." She left without another word. Martha remained seated, her gaze on the floorboards worn by years of pacing feet. Her mind drifted again. Samuel's laugh, Samuel's tiny hands learning to hold a spoon, his face when they took him. She hadn't screamed, she hadn't fought, but something inside her had broken clean in two. The children she nursed now were not hers. They had never been hers, yet she had sung to them, rocked them, fed them, wept silently over their cribs, while their mother slept 2 doors down, and one by one they died. She had not poisoned them, she had not smothered them, but she had known. She had seen the signs, shallow breath, glassy eyes, the slowing pulse, and each time she had waited. She had sat beside them and done nothing more. And they slipped away. A war no one saw, a war waged in silence. As night fell, Martha stood at the nursery window, watching the moon rise over the distant tree line. Her reflection stared back at her, stoic, still. She whispered to it, "You see me, don't you?" And the glass, like the house, said nothing at all. The morning fog clung to the cotton fields like wet gauze, muting color and sound. In the distance, wheels crunched over gravel, slow and steady. Martha looked up from the basin where she was rinsing linens. The buggy rolled into view, drawn by a dark bay horse, and behind the reins sat a man in a charcoal coat, hat low over his brow. Dr. Silas Wren. The house was already tense before he stepped onto the porch. News of his visit had traveled fast. Eliza had written to him weeks ago after the last child died, but she hadn't expected him to come. Not truly. Not after so many polite refusals from physicians too busy or too far. Wren was not a local. He came from Augusta, known for treating wealthy plantation families and wounded soldiers. His reputation carried weight, and so did his eyes, pale blue, sharp as needles. He greeted Eliza with brief politeness, then asked directly to see the surviving children. Martha stood beside Clara's bed when he entered the nursery. He nodded to her, professional but distant. "Eliza tells me you've been caring for them." "Yes, sir," Martha replied. He knelt beside Clara, gently lifted her wrist, checked her pulse. Then he leaned close, lifting her eyelids one at a time, watching her sluggish response. "What's she been eating?" he asked. "Broth, grits, small sips of milk." "And before the fever started?" "Bread, stewed peaches. She never ate much." He scribbled something in a small leather notebook, then moved to James, who sat up with effort, visibly uneasy. "You remember me?" Wren asked. James nodded slightly. "Good, you've gotten thinner, but your lungs sound clear. No congestion." "No, sir." Wren turned back to Martha. "Have they been sharing food?" "No." He studied her a moment longer than necessary. "And the others? The children who passed, did their illnesses begin like this?" Martha's hands tightened slightly on the washcloth she held. "Yes, sir. Slow. Fever first. Then weakness." "And you administered the tonics?" "When permitted." Wren stood, brushing off his coat. May I see where they were buried? Eliza stiffened. Is that necessary? If I'm to understand the pattern of this illness, he replied. Yes. The walk to the graveyard was brief but heavy. The doctor's boots left clear marks in the soft dirt. He stood over the row of small markers, weathered and crooked. 3 names, 3 deaths in under 2 years. No other household members fell ill, he asked quietly. No, sir, Martha answered. He glanced at her again. Strange, isn't it? Something that touches only the children. She said nothing. Back inside, he sat with Eliza in the drawing room, the door partially open. Martha passed by just close enough to hear. Malnutrition could explain part of it, Wren said, but they were not starving, and their symptoms were consistent. Too consistent. I thought it might be the water, Eliza offered, or mold. The nursery has always been damp. Possible, but unlikely that such a specific illness would strike only your children and not the rest of the household. There was a pause. Do you suspect foul play? I suspect patterns, and patterns speak. Eliza's voice shook. Are you accusing my staff? No, ma'am, but someone in this house knows more than they've said. Martha walked away then, her feet light, her face unreadable. In the corridor, Auntie Ruth was waiting. He's got eyes, that one, Ruth murmured, digging where no one's asked him to dig. Martha said nothing, only glanced once toward the nursery. Storm's coming, child, Ruth added, voice low, and it don't care whose house it tears down. Later that night, Martha sat at the edge of her bed, listening to the wind brush the window pane. The doctor's words echoed in her ears, not because they were dangerous, but because they were close. Too close, and closer still, something was beginning to stir. The night air was thick with heat and the scent of damp soil. Crickets screamed in the darkness, their chorus broken only by the occasional groan of the wind or the distant hoot of an owl. In the quarters, the enslaved huddled close to their fires, speaking in hushed tones no louder than breath. Something unspoken hung in the air, coiling through the cabins like smoke. Inside Ruth's small room, a pot of bitter root tea simmered over the coals. The light flickered against the walls, casting long shadows across the faces of the 3 women seated around her. Martha stood at the door, unmoving. You go and stay out there all night, child? Ruth asked without turning. Martha stepped in and shut the door. Her eyes flicked to the women, Lena and Hester, 2 field hands with wary eyes and raw palms. We was just talking, Lena said, not looking at Martha. Talking don't mean accusing, Hester added quickly. Martha nodded once, slowly. She been burying them one by one, Lena murmured, and always in her care. She ain't the one digging graves, Ruth snapped. Don't twist your tongues with poison. We ain't saying she's done something evil, Hester said, but what if she ain't done enough? A silence fell heavy in the room. Ruth stirred the tea, the spoon tapping slow and steady against the clay. I been with them children day and night, Martha said at last, her voice like smoke, soft, curling. I fed 'em, cleaned 'em, held 'em till they went cold. No one questions you was there, Lena said. That's the point, ain't it? Martha's gaze was still. You think I watched 'em die for sport? No, Ruth said firmly. No one thinks that. But folks wonderin', Hester said. And you walking round like you carrying no weight. Martha's lips tightened. She turned to leave. You ever dream about your boy? Ruth asked. Martha froze, her back to them. Samuel. I remember him. Smart one, always running to you with his hands full of dirt and questions. Martha didn't turn. I don't dream, ain't safe to. You ain't cried once, Lena said. Not for Mary. Not for any of 'em. 'Cause crying don't bring 'em back, Martha said, her voice flat, and it don't bring him back neither. A gust of wind pushed through the cracks in the cabin walls. The fire sputtered. Outside, the quarters were restless. Men muttered under their breath. Women prayed louder than usual. A child cried out in sleep, then was quickly hushed. Rumor was a fire that didn't need air. Martha returned to her cabin, bolted the door. The shoe was still there, Samuel's shoe. She picked it up, thumbed the worn leather. 100 memories slammed into her chest, but she pushed them down, deep, where no one could see. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling now. She could still feel Mary's breath as it slowed, hear the faint whisper of Grace's last word, "Mama." Not hers. What would they do if they knew the truth? Not the whole truth, not yet, but the edge of it. That sometimes she'd known the sickness was coming and she hadn't told. That sometimes she'd sat longer than she should, hoping, waiting. The war inside her had left no scars on her skin, only inside, only where the pain couldn't be measured. A knock came at the door, one rap. Then silence. Ruth's voice came through the wood. "You can't walk alone forever, child. Even the Lord walked with someone." Martha said nothing. Her eyes burned, but no tears came. And outside the wind rose again, whispering through the trees. Something was shifting. Not just suspicion, not just fear, but judgment. The morning came heavy with silence. A fog rested low over the fields, clinging to the tall grass and fence posts, as though the earth itself refused to wake. In the house the air felt wrong, too still, too close. Martha stepped into the nursery with her arms full of fresh linens, but she stopped short. James was curled in the bed, smaller than she remembered, his skin pale and damp. The color had drained from his lips, and his chest rose too fast, like he was chasing each breath. She dropped the linens and crossed the room. "James?" she said softly. His eyelids fluttered open. He tried to speak, but only a hoarse wheeze came out. She touched his forehead. Burning. Clara, still wrapped in her quilt nearby, stirred and sat up slowly. "He was coughing in his sleep," she whispered. "All night." Martha looked at the basin. Clean. No blood. That was something. But the fever was high and rising. She moved quickly, soaked a cloth, pressed it to his head, then opened the window to let in the cool air. Her hands moved from habit, but her mind was spinning. This wasn't just a cold. This was how it had started for the others. She went to the kitchen for broth and herbs, but before she could return, Miss Eliza came barreling down the hall, hair undone, face pale. "Martha," she called, voice sharp. "Is it true? Is it happening again?" Martha didn't answer. She brushed past her and returned to the nursery. Eliza followed, stopped in the doorway, hands clenched at her sides as she stared at her son. "Oh God," she whispered, crossing the room in 2 stiff steps. "No, no, no," James moaned weakly. "You'll fix this," Eliza said, turning suddenly to Martha. Her voice cracked between rage and desperation. "You always said you knew what to do. You said you'd save the others as long as you could. Do something." Martha met her eyes. "I'll try." "Not try," Eliza hissed. "Save him." Martha looked back to the boy. His eyes were glassy now, barely focused. He tried to reach for her hand, but missed. She took it gently, held it in both of hers. Later, as the house fell into a strained hush, Martha sat beside the bed, dampening cloths, measuring out tiny sips of herb water, praying the fever would break. James stirred. "It hurts," he murmured. "I know," she whispered. "Is Mary mad at me?" Martha froze. "Why would she be mad?" "Because I stayed, and she left." Martha brushed his damp hair back. "Mary loved you. She was never mad." He closed his eyes. "I want Mama, but she's always crying." "She's scared," Martha said, voice almost too soft to hear. "Like you." "Are you scared too?" "Yes." Night came. A thunderhead built slowly beyond the trees. Inside the nursery, the lamp burned low, casting faint shadows on the walls. James whimpered in his sleep, lost in the fever. Clara curled up tight in the corner bed, watching Martha without speaking. Auntie Ruth knocked once at the open door. "I got something might help," she said, holding out a wrapped bundle of dried leaves and bark. "For the fever." "Strong but clean." Martha took it, fingers brushing Ruth's. "You know what's coming," Ruth said quietly. "I know." "Then choose careful, 'cause you only get to choose once." Martha stood over James again, the bundle in her hand. She could boil it, make a strong tonic, maybe bring him back from the edge. Or she could wait. The storm rolled closer, rumbling in the distance. And still the boy breathed. The storm passed without rain, just thunder and wind that rattled the shutters and stirred ghosts in the walls. Martha sat beside James's bed through the night, the wrapped bundle from Ruth untouched on the table. She had made no tonic, not yet. James breathed in shallow bursts, his skin flushed, eyes flickering behind closed lids. Sometimes he muttered, nonsense, names, questions without end. Once he called for Mary, another time for a man Martha didn't recognize. Near dawn, Clara whispered from across the room, "Will he die too?" Martha turned, surprised to find the girl awake. "Don't say that," she answered. "Everyone else did." Martha didn't respond. She looked down at James's small hand in her own. He was burning up. His breath rattled. She stood, took the bundle and walked downstairs. The kitchen was quiet. A single candle flickered near the hearth. She ground the herbs slowly, her motions mechanical, boiled the water, stirred the bark into a bitter brew, strained it through cloth. The smell filled the room, earthy, sharp, alive. As she poured the dark liquid into a cup, footsteps came from the hall. Miss Eliza. She looked hollowed, lips dry, eyes rimmed with red. "Is he worse?" "Yes." Eliza nodded slowly, hands shaking as she gripped the edge of the table. "I used to believe," she said suddenly, "that we were blessed, that this land, this house, these children, they were God's reward." Martha said nothing. "But now," Eliza continued, "I think maybe we're being punished." Martha met her gaze. Eliza blinked, then added, "For what we've done to people like you." Martha's face didn't change, but something behind her eyes flickered. "You never said that before. I've never buried 3 children before." A long silence stretched between them. "I made promises to you once," Eliza said, softer now. "Do you remember?" Martha nodded. "You promised you'd keep Samuel safe." Eliza looked away. "You said I'd stay with him, that he'd grow up beside me, that he'd never be sold." Eliza's voice cracked. "It wasn't my choice. My husband—" "He was your husband," Martha interrupted. "Not your master." Eliza stepped back as if struck. "I didn't forget," Martha added. "I never do." The storm outside had quieted, but the wind still sighed through the cracks. Eliza reached out, touched the cup Martha held. "Will it help him?" "I don't know." Eliza's voice was a whisper. "Please, please save him." She left, without waiting for an answer. Martha carried the cup back to the nursery. James was barely conscious now. She lifted his head gently, tilted the liquid to his lips. He swallowed slowly, painfully, but the cup was soon empty. Clara watched from under her quilt. "What was that?" "Something old," Martha said. "Something that might help." "You're not mad at him?" Martha looked at her. "Why would I be mad?" "Because of what Miss Eliza did. Because of your boy." Martha sat down again, smoothing the quilt over James's frail frame. "I don't blame children for the choices of grown folk," she said. "Even when they carry the weight of it." Clara was quiet a long time. Then, "You loved Mary, I know you did." Martha's throat tightened. "Yes. Even though she wasn't yours? She was mine in all the ways that mattered." Outside, a bird began to sing, just one, soft and distant. The sky was lightening with the pale grey of dawn. Martha closed her eyes for a moment, exhaustion pressing on her like stone. But in the hush she heard something else. James's breath, steadying, just slightly. She looked down, and for the first time in days, the fever had eased. The morning sun crept slowly through the nursery windows, warm and golden, but Martha didn't trust it. James was sleeping now, his skin cooler, breath easier, but it was a fragile calm. Fever could trick the eye, break one moment, return the next like vengeance unfinished. Clara had fallen asleep, curled into herself like a question with no answer. Martha stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, her mind churning. She stepped out into the hallway and made her way back toward the quarters. The house was beginning to stir, creaking with life. Somewhere behind her, Eliza's voice rang out in clipped commands, brittle from days without sleep. When Martha reached Ruth's door, it was already open. "You gave it to him," Ruth said, without looking up from her bowl of herbs. "Yes. And?" "He's resting easier." Ruth nodded slowly, like she'd expected nothing less. "It's old medicine. Not fancy, but it don't lie." Martha sat down across from her. The warmth of the coals seeped through the floorboards. "You put something in it?" Martha asked. Ruth raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Something more than medicine." Ruth gave a slow smile, not cruel but knowing. "You tell me." Martha stared at her. "He said Mary came to him. Told him to come with her." Ruth reached for a small pouch and dropped crushed bark into a bowl. "The sick see all kinds of things, but sometimes what they see ain't just dreams." "I don't want ghosts," Martha said, voice low. "I want peace." "Peace don't come from tea," Ruth answered. "It comes from reckoning." Martha looked down at her hands, strong, steady, stained from work and years. "He was so close," she whispered, "and I waited." "Waited for what?" "For God to decide, for the house to make up its mind. I didn't want to choose." Ruth's hands moved without pause, grinding leaves with the pestle. "Child, not choosing is a choice. Same as any." Later, back at the house, Martha prepared a second batch of the tonic. She knew the balance now, how much to soothe, how much to stir the body into fight. She moved with intention, her fingers sure. As she worked, Eliza came into the kitchen. "Is he improving?" Martha didn't answer at first. She finished pouring the liquid into a cup and wiped the rim clean. "Yes," she said, "for now." Eliza nodded stiffly. Her eyes lingered on the cup. "That's the same tea you gave Mary, isn't it?" Martha turned, holding her gaze. "It is. She died anyway. She was too far gone when I gave it." "So you waited too long?" "Yes." The words hung there, plain, brutal, undeniable. Eliza's lips parted, but no sound came. She turned and left. That night, Martha brought the tea back to James. He was awake, barely, and opened his mouth without protest. His skin was damp, but not burning. "You came back," he said. "I never left. I heard them, the others, whispering. I thought I was already gone." Martha pressed the cup to his lips. "You're still here." In the corner, Clara stirred, watching silently. Martha smoothed the quilt around James's chest, her heart too full to speak. As she stood, she glanced out the window. Beyond the willow trees, the family grave sat still under moonlight, and in the hush that followed, the wind carried no voices, only the faint scent of something bitter and old. Dr. Wren returned unannounced. The buggy rolled in under a grey afternoon sky, wheels cracking over dry gravel. No one came to greet him this time. He tied his horse, walked straight to the house, and knocked once before stepping in. Eliza met him in the front hall. Her face was drawn, lips tight with sleepless worry. "You weren't expected," she said. "I gathered that," he replied, "but I need to speak with your nursemaid." "She's tending to James. He's stable now." "That's good," he said, but didn't smile. "Still, I'd like a word." Eliza hesitated, then nodded. "She'll meet you on the veranda." Martha came minutes later, her apron clean but damp. She stepped outside and faced him, hands clasped before her. He studied her. "The boy's fever has broken?" "Yes." "What did you give him?" "Herbs," she said. "From Ruth." "And you trust her medicine?" "I've seen it work." He nodded slowly. "You're not like the others here, Martha. You don't flinch, you don't ask questions, you observe." She said nothing. "I need you to observe with me now, not as servant to mistress, but as one person trying to understand what's happened in this house." Martha's face was unreadable. "Understand what?" "I've spoken to people. Not just here. In town. I've read records. The pattern of deaths on this property, it's not a coincidence and it's not natural. You think someone killed them?" He didn't blink. "I think someone let them die." The wind shifted. The cotton fields beyond the trees swayed gently, like waves caught mid-motion. "You're not saying it's me," she said. "No," he answered, "but I think you know who it is." Martha held his gaze. "What do you think you'll do with that knowledge?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not a fool. I've seen guilt in the eyes of parents. I've seen grief twist people into shadows of themselves. And I've seen silence, used like a blade." He stepped closer, voice lower. "You're not grieving like the others, Martha, and I'm trying to understand why." She looked out toward the fields. "You ever lose a child, Doctor?" "No, I have. I know." She turned back to him. "Then you also know no one cared. No one recorded his death. No one marked his grave. He didn't even die. He was sold." Dr. Wren said nothing. "Tell me what justice is for that. Tell me who's guilty when a child disappears and the world keeps going." Still, he said nothing. "You think grief looks a certain way," she continued, "but some of us learn to carry it different. Quiet, deep, so it don't eat us alive." She moved past him then, back into the house. Dr. Wren remained on the veranda, the wind playing with the brim of his hat. He looked down at the wood beneath his feet, rotting at the edges, soft with moisture. This house was dying, one piece at a time. Inside, Eliza hovered outside the nursery, watching Martha tend to James. The boy's eyes were open now, clearer, more aware. "I want to write to my uncle in Savannah," Eliza said. Martha didn't turn. "Why?" "He has money, connections. If James gets worse again, I want help ready." Martha adjusted the boy's blanket. "Do what you think is best." But her voice held no conviction. Eliza hesitated, then asked, "Did the doctor say anything strange to you?" "No more than usual." Eliza frowned. "He frightens me sometimes. He looks at this place like it's cursed." Martha glanced at her. "Maybe it is." That night, lightning flashed on the horizon. Not close, but enough to remind them of the storm that never truly left. And Dr. Wren did not leave the plantation. He unpacked a bag in the guest room and waited. James woke at dawn with a dry throat and clearer eyes. Martha sat beside him, arms crossed over her lap, still and silent. She had not slept. The candle had burned low, leaving wax pooled on the bedside table. A fly buzzed against the window pane. "Miss Bell?" James rasped. She looked at him, and something in her face softened. "Ah, you're still here. Did the tea do it?" She nodded once. "Maybe." He shifted beneath the blanket, wincing. "I feel like I ran all night." "You fought." "I saw Samuel," he whispered. Martha froze. "What?" "In a dream. A boy with a shoe that didn't fit no more. He didn't say nothing, just looked at me like he was waiting." Martha's mouth went dry. She stood, smoothed the quilt. "Dreams are funny like that." Downstairs, Eliza paced the parlor, a telegram clutched in her hand. The ink was still damp. She had sent for her uncle, after all. He would arrive by week's end with his own physician and an appetite for answers. Dr. Wren stood by the window, arms folded, watching the fog burn off the fields. "You didn't tell her." "I don't know what you mean," Eliza replied. "You didn't tell her you wrote for help. She's a servant. She doesn't need to know everything." He turned to her. "But she knows something, and you know it. That's why you keep circling her like a frightened animal." Eliza's lips curled. "She's taken care of my children better than I ever could. That's the truth. I trusted her more than myself." "Then why do you keep questioning her?" "Because they're dead." Wren stepped closer, voice low. "And you think she let it happen?" "I don't know what I think," Eliza snapped. "That's the problem." Later that day, Clara coughed, just once, but it echoed too loud in the quiet house. Martha turned toward her, eyes narrowing. The girl rubbed her throat and said, "It's nothing." But the air shifted. Eliza appeared in the doorway not long after, her expression hard. "She needs checking." Martha didn't move. "Her fever's normal. Skin's cool. No signs. I want Wren to examine her." "You don't trust me anymore." Eliza's voice cracked. "I don't know how to trust right now." Martha rose. "Then it's already begun." "What has?" The thing you're afraid of, losing her. It starts when you stop believing. Eliza stepped back, shaken. I just want her to live. And I want mine back. The words fell like stones. Eliza looked stricken. Martha brushed past her, the moment broken. That night, Wren walked the property in silence. He spoke to field hands, to the cook, to Ruth. He asked careful questions. Who had seen what, heard what, remembered the days before each child fell ill. Patterns began to emerge, quiet ones. Like how Martha had spent each final night alone with them, how she was never seen crying, how she had once said, years ago, "They take what they love, I take what they leave." In the quarters, Ruth sat with a candle between them. "You know she didn't kill him," she told Wren. "I never said she did. You're digging in the wrong direction." "I'm not digging, I'm waiting." "For what?" "For her to tell me the truth." And the truth was closer than anyone knew, because Martha, back in the nursery, was watching Clara breathe and wondering if she would let herself try again to save one more, or let the silence do it for her. The evening settled heavy, thick with the smell of rain that never came. In the nursery, Martha laid out clean linens, her hands steady though her chest burned as though something inside had caught fire. James was sleeping peacefully now, his breaths slow, even. But Clara coughed again, sharper this time, a dry sound that cracked the quiet. Martha turned quickly. The girl tried to hide it behind her hand. "I told you," Clara said, voice trembling. "It's nothing." Martha crossed the room and pressed her palm to the child's forehead. Warm. Too warm. She swallowed hard. "Lie down." Clara obeyed without protest, pulling the quilt to her chin. Her wide eyes glistened in the lamplight. "Am I gonna die like Mary?" The words hit like stones in Martha's chest. "No," she said firmly. "You said that before." Martha's throat tightened. She smoothed Clara's hair back, forcing her voice calm. "You're stronger than you think. Rest now." When she turned away, her hands shook. She steadied them on the washstand, staring at her own reflection in the dark glass of the water jug. The fire in her chest spread hotter. Down the hall, Eliza's steps echoed. She entered, saw Clara pale beneath the quilt, and froze. "Not again," she whispered. "God, not again." Her gaze snapped to Martha. "Do something." "I will." "When? How long do we wait this time?" Eliza's voice was shrill. "You waited with Mary, with Thomas, with Grace, and they all slipped away." Martha faced her, expression hard. "You think I wanted them gone?" Eliza's breath shook. "I don't know what to think anymore." "You made promises to me once," Martha said, voice low but burning. "You broke them. I've carried that weight every day. Don't you dare talk to me about waiting." Eliza flinched, but her desperation swallowed the shame. She rushed to Clara's bedside, clutching the girl's hand. "Please, baby. Please stay with me." Clara coughed again, weaker this time, and leaned into her mother's arm. Martha turned away. She couldn't watch. Not now. Not with the fire pressing up her throat. She slipped into the hallway, found Ruth waiting by the wall, eyes knowing. "She's burning?" Ruth asked. "Yes. You gonna help her?" Martha's silence was answer enough. Ruth stepped closer, her voice rough. "I seen what's inside you. That fire, you think it's punishment, but it ain't. It's choice. And choice is worse than chains sometimes." Martha looked away, jaw tight. "When Samuel was sold, I begged her to keep him safe. She promised. Next week, he was gone." Her voice cracked for the first time in years. "I never saw him again, never touched his face. Never heard his voice." Ruth touched her shoulder. "I know, child, but letting go of the living don't bring back the lost." Martha closed her eyes, the fire in her chest choking her. Back in the nursery, Clara whispered, "Mama?" Eliza stroked her daughter's hand, tears streaming unchecked. "Yes, darling, I'm here. I don't want to see Mary yet." Eliza bit her lip to keep from sobbing aloud. Martha returned quietly, carrying a basin of cool water. She placed a damp cloth on Clara's forehead, forcing her hands steady. Her heart raged against her ribs, every beat a war. She whispered to herself, too soft for anyone to hear, "I won't wait this time." The fire inside her did not fade, it only burned brighter. And outside, thunder rolled again, distant but closing in. The night pressed down on the quarters like a heavy quilt. The air was damp, filled with the smell of rain-soaked wood and ash from cooking fires long since extinguished. Inside Ruth's cabin, a single candle burned low, its flame bending with each draught that slipped through the cracks. Martha sat at the edge of the small table, shoulders rigid, hands clenched in her lap. Ruth ground herbs with slow, steady movements, watching her. "You ain't been sleeping," Ruth said. "Sleep don't come when a child's burning with fever." Ruth set the pestle aside and leaned closer. "It ain't the fever keeping you up, it's the ghosts." Martha's jaw tightened. She looked at the floor. "Tell me I'm wrong," Ruth pressed. Martha didn't answer. "You think you hid it, but I seen it. Every time one of 'em children took sick, you was there waiting. Not rushing for help, not crying out, just watching, like you was waiting for something to end." Martha's voice came low, raw. "I never poisoned 'em, never touched a drop of harm to their lips." "I know," Ruth said, "but you didn't fight either." Martha's hands trembled in her lap. She clenched them tighter. "When Samuel was sold, I begged her. I begged her to keep him, she promised, swore he'd be safe. Next week they dragged him off this land like he was nothing." Her voice cracked, sharp as broken glass. "You tell me, what's the use in fighting for other people's children when mine was taken and left to die in some place I'll never see?" The candle flickered. The silence between them thickened. "I sat with them," Martha continued, her eyes wet now. "Held them while they breathed their last. And I knew I could fetch more medicine, call the doctor sooner, pray louder, but I didn't. I let time take them. I let God take them. Because no one came for Samuel, no one came for me." Ruth's face was lined with grief, but her voice was firm. "Child, you can't measure pain by trading lives. You carrying poison in your heart and it's eating you." Martha's breath shook. She pressed her fists to her eyes. "I told myself I was giving them peace, that if death wanted them, I'd make sure it came gentle. But maybe it was vengeance all along." Ruth reached across the table, laid her old knotted hand over Martha's. "Ain't too late to choose different. You hear me?" "It ain't too late." Martha looked at her eyes shining in the candlelight. "And if it is, then the Lord'll know your heart. But the living still need you. That girl in that house, she's still breathing. She's still waiting." The flame wavered, throwing shadows across the walls like restless spirits. Martha whispered, "Sometimes I wonder if Samuel sees me. If he sees what I done." Ruth squeezed her hand. "He see you, child, but not like you fear. He see the mother who loved him, who still do. Don't let shame be the last thing he know of you." The words lodged deep, but Martha couldn't speak. Her chest ached, heavy with the truth she'd buried for years. Finally she stood, shoulders squared, though her hands still shook. "Clara needs me." Ruth nodded, watching her go. At the door Martha paused. The night outside was black and endless, the candlelight behind her warm but fleeting. She whispered, not to Ruth, not to the house, but to the boy she could no longer touch, "I won't turn away again." And she stepped into the dark. The house was silent except for the creak of old beams settling in the night. Martha moved through its halls as if weighed down by stone. The words she had spoken to Ruth clung to her skin, raw and unshakable. Clara's weak breaths echoed upstairs, pulling her back toward duty, but another presence was waiting. Dr. Wren stood in the parlor, coat draped over a chair, lamp burning low beside him. His eyes found Martha as she entered, sharp but not cruel. "You've been carrying something," he said simply. Martha stiffened. "And you think it's your place to take it from me?" "I think silence is killing you faster than fever ever could." She folded her arms. "You don't know me. I know grief when I see it. I know guilt, too." He stepped closer, voice steady. "And I know you've chosen to live with both." Martha turned away, her breath unsteady. What good would it do speaking it out loud? Would it bring them back? Would it bring him back? "No," Wren said softly. but it might bring you back." She laughed bitterly, a sound like breaking glass. "Back to what? I ain't had a life to return to since the day they sold Samuel." The name slipped out before she could stop it. Wren caught it, held it like a thread. "Your son." Her eyes flashed wet and furious. "Don't you speak his name." "I don't need to. It's written on your face every time you look at those children." Martha's chest heaved, the fire inside her burning bright again. "You want truth, Doctor? I'll give it. I let them die, one by one. I sat at their bedsides and did less than I could have. Because I wanted someone to feel what I felt when my boy was ripped from my arms." The words fell heavy, filling the room with something darker than silence. Wren didn't recoil. He didn't condemn. He only watched her with those pale, steady eyes. "Then why save James?" he asked. Martha's breath caught. "You could have let him go too. But you didn't. You made the tea. You fought." "Why?" Her voice trembled. "Because I can't carry another death. My arms are full already." Wren stepped closer, his tone firm, but not unkind. "You're standing at a crossroad. You can keep walking the path of silence and anger until it swallows you whole, or you can choose to live different." Martha looked at him sharply. "And what if I don't deserve different?" "Deserve has nothing to do with it," he said. "The question is, what will you give to the ones who are still breathing?" Her throat tightened. Clara's cough drifted faintly down the hall, fragile and human. Martha's eyes closed, her body trembling with the weight of it. "You think confession saves me," she whispered. "I think confession frees you," Wren answered. "Whether you believe in God or not, whether this land is cursed or not, that choice is still yours." Martha opened her eyes, the fire in them dim but alive. "And if I stay silent?" "Then you'll have judged yourself already." The words sank deep. She turned her face away, unable to meet his gaze. At last she spoke, barely above a breath. "I'll care for her, not out of vengeance, not out of obedience, but because I won't let my silence write the end of her story." Wren nodded once, solemn. "Then that's your beginning." The lamp flickered, shadows stretching long across the walls. Martha's heart beat heavy, but for the first time in years it didn't feel like chains. It felt like choice. Days passed, slow as syrup. The fever burned through Clara, and then, like a storm that had wrung itself dry, it ebbed. She lay pale and thin, but her eyes cleared. Her voice, small as a bird's, carried into the nursery once more. "Martha," she whispered, tugging at the quilt. Martha leaned close. "I'm here. Am I better?" "You are," Martha said, and for the first time she believed it. Eliza hovered in the doorway. Her frame slumped as though the last weeks had carved years into her bones. She pressed a trembling hand to her lips when she heard her daughter's voice. Then she rushed forward, falling to her knees by the bed. "My darling," Eliza choked, kissing Clara's hand. "My brave girl." Clara blinked at her, then turned her gaze back to Martha as though searching for reassurance. Eliza noticed. The glance hit her harder than any blow. For a moment, bitterness flickered, her own child clinging to another woman. But behind the bitterness came something colder, gratitude, a truth she couldn't deny. "She'll live?" Eliza asked. "Yes," Martha answered, steady. The mistress bowed her head. "Then I owe you more than I can ever repay." Martha's face didn't change. Gratitude was a fragile thing in this house. Promises had been spoken before and broken like twigs. She didn't trust words anymore. Dr. Wren stood in the hall listening. His face was unreadable, but his eyes softened at the sound of Clara's laugh, the first in months, faint though it was. He closed his notebook without writing another word. Outside, the fields stretched quiet beneath a sky heavy with clouds. The air smelled of damp earth and pine. Men bent low in the cotton rows. Women carried water from the well, life pressing forward as though nothing in the big house had changed. But everyone knew. Word spread fast in whispers. The girl had lived. That night, Martha stepped out into the yard alone. The sky was moonless, the stars faint through a veil of cloud. She walked to the edge of the graveyard, where the willow branches swayed in the dark. 3 small markers stood crooked in the earth: Mary, Thomas, Grace, the soil still soft from recent rain. She knelt and touched the ground. "I didn't fight for you the way I should have," she whispered, "and I'll carry that always." Her chest tightened, but for once she let it. No more pushing the grief down, no more burying it with silence. Behind her, footsteps crunched softly. Eliza's voice came, hesitant. "I thought I'd find you here." Martha rose slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. Eliza's gaze lingered on the graves. Her voice was ragged. "I don't know how to face them." "You already do," Martha said. "Every morning when you open your eyes." Eliza's hands twisted together. "I wronged you. I know it. You asked me for mercy once, and I betrayed you. If there's judgment for that, I deserve it." Martha looked at her long, searching. "Judgment ain't mine to give, but forgiveness," Martha cut her off, her tone even. "Forgiveness is earned, not begged." Eliza flinched, then nodded. For once, she had no defense. They stood in silence, 2 women bound by loss and divided by a chasm too wide to name. From the house, Clara's faint voice called, "Mama!" Eliza turned sharply, rushing back inside. Martha stayed. She looked once more at the graves, then lifted her gaze to the dark fields beyond. The fire in her chest had not gone out, but it no longer consumed her. It glowed now, steady, guiding. The girl had lived. And with her survival, something inside Martha shifted too. Not forgiveness, not peace, but the first fragile shape of a new beginning. The plantation quieted in the weeks that followed. Clara regained her strength slowly, walking again through the halls with small, deliberate steps. James laughed now and then, his voice still weak but carrying hope. The house, once heavy with mourning, breathed easier. Yet Martha carried her silence like a mantle. One evening the bell tolled from the quarters, slow, hollow. Ruth had passed. Old age, no sickness, no fever. She had slipped away in her sleep. Martha walked behind the procession just as she had for the children, her steps steady, her face unreadable. But this time, the weight pressed deeper. Ruth had been the one voice that pierced her silence, the one who demanded truth. And now that voice was gone. At the graveside she lingered after the others left, crouching beside the fresh mound. She brushed her hand across the soil, whispering, "You carried me when I couldn't carry myself. I'll walk the rest alone." The wind stirred through the grass, rustling soft as if answering. Back in her cabin, Martha lit a single candle. On the shelf above her bed sat Samuel's shoe, worn and cracked. She lifted it, cradled it in her palm. Closing her eyes, she saw him as he had been. A boy running barefoot through the yard, dirt streaked across his cheeks, laughter spilling like music. The memory was sharper than any blade, but it no longer gutted her, it steadied her. She lay the shoe down gently and whispered, "I'll see you again, my son." Not here, but somewhere. Eliza came to her days later, standing in the doorway of the cabin out of place among the worn wood and smoke-stained walls. "I wanted to thank you," she said. Martha didn't move. "For what?" "For saving Clara. For saving me, though I don't deserve it." Martha studied her carefully, then turned back to her work, folding cloth. "Gratitude don't change the past." "No," Eliza admitted, "but maybe it can change what comes next." Martha looked up, eyes hard but not cruel. "You still hold the chains. You still choose who breaks and who bends. Gratitude without change is just another lie." Eliza swallowed. For once she had no reply. She turned and left, her footsteps fading down the hall. The days grew longer. The cotton bloomed white across the fields. Men and women bent low beneath the sun, the cycle unbroken. Yet for Martha, something within had shifted. She had chosen once more to fight, not for vengeance, not for forgiveness, but for the living. One night, she dreamed of Samuel. He stood at the edge of the willow grove, older now, taller than she remembered. He wore no chains. His smile was gentle. "You see me, Mama," he said. She reached for him, but he faded into dawn, leaving only the echo of his voice. When she woke, the fire in her chest was steady, no longer a storm, but a flame she could carry. Weeks later, Clara sat beside her in the kitchen, small hands clumsy as she tried to shape dough. "You make it look easy," the girl said. Martha smiled faintly. "It never is." Clara laughed, a soft sound that filled the room like light. Martha looked at her and thought, "The girl lived. That is enough." Outside, the bell hung silent in the yard, its iron face streaked with rust. It had tolled for so many, children, elders, lost souls whose names the world would never write. But tonight it was still. Martha stepped into the yard, lifting her eyes to the wide Georgia sky. Stars shone faint but clear. She breathed deep, steady, carrying grief and strength in equal measure. The reckoning was done, not through judgment or fire, but through the simple act of choosing to go on. If this story moved you, subscribe now for more untold histories, voices long silenced, waiting to be heard. Click on the story waiting for you, The Runaway Who Became a Spy, A War of Shadows.